Years ago, I came to the conviction that everything we consider physical reality is actually fashioned from a field of divine consciousness. I reached this conclusion in the process of trying to imagine a singular phenomenon from which all of space, time, matter, energy, mind, and spirit, and therefore each of us, might all arise. Our experience with dreaming demonstrates how consciousness can fashion a world of experience in which all the various forms of seeming physicality amount to illusions. It's become my belief that the physical world arises from consciousness instead of being the thing that produces it. If that's true, then some phenomenon or process operating within the field of divine consciousness responds to God's will that this universe exist by bringing it into being and sustaining it. By whatever means such a thing might work, it sounds like the primordial throb of the universe to me. A lifelong curiosity about the fundamental nature of things leads me to imagine a philosophical narrative that unifies my deepest spiritual beliefs with leading theories from science. The narrative for which I yearn draws deeply upon the traditions of reason while being respectful of sacred mystery. What I seek is a common ground upon which the insights and truths offered by reason and faith connect and overlap with one another to produce a more complete and detailed understanding of human existence than either can describe on its own. In this edition of the Temporal Reverie, I want to talk about a particular characteristic of my imagined common ground, the intriguing possibility that all the substance in the universe, all matter and energy, results from vibration. Maybe the moment-by-moment state of the whole universe results from an unimaginably large expanse of something that gets jostled and agitated routinely by endlessly changing patterns of vibration. One phenomenon we closely associate with vibration is sound. Long before our powers of speech evolved enough to make use of language possible, we learned how to put the anatomy of our voices to work expressing ourselves in grunts and howls. Touch a couple fingertips to your larynx as you say a few words, and you can feel the vibrations of your voice. You can capture sound waves with a microphone, then digitize and display their vibrational pattern as a waveform on a computer screen. Most everybody knows that sound waves vibrate. In time, we evolved the means to sculpt and shape sounds that we could then link together into our first words. We learned how to recognize words by remembering each of their sound patterns. But not only words have distinct sounds, but also the sounds of individual people's voices, each vibrating in their own distinct and personal ways to produce their individual sound. The actual vibration made when someone speaks aloud is partly the result of the sound patterns each of the words produces as they are spoken. It's also partly the result of personal speech patterns, like those from regional accents, or which result from pathologies like stuttering. Then there are vibrational effects that may be injected because of present moment emotions and state of well-being or stress. All these things can influence the resulting sound vibration. My point is that the universe is filled by many independent, overlapping vibrations combining in infinite patterns that are highly textured and complex. Sound connects us to the vibrational nature of the universe in a very tangible way. The New Testament book of John begins with a cryptic statement about God and something called the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The word being described in John 1:1 is not just any old word. This particular word is the Word, a distinction that suggests something singularly special about its unique vibration. Perhaps one way to interpret the word in John 1:1 is as symbolic shorthand for a vibration that ceaselessly expresses the will of God. Perhaps the word is a vibrational boundary between God's mind and the place within himself that he reserved for the formation and continuous creation of the universe. This boundary would be a vibrational envelope in which we find the physical universe and outside which we find the domain of the divine. Creation begins with pure thought formed in the intangible background field of divine consciousness. In order to translate that pure thought into physical material expression, it must be given form. That form arises from the pattern of vibration by which that idea is conceived and through which it is ultimately expressed in the universe. The most direct and immediate way to give form to a thought is to conceptualize it in words. Language gives us the means to communicate precisely because it provides a system for encoding our ideas so that we can pass them to others. A system substantially made up of vocabulary in which each word conveys both descriptive and emotional meanings, lending the weight and power of those words to the form we seek to create for our ideas. Language is a tool of the mind, which itself is an expression of consciousness. The process of giving ideas an identifiable form as words is something we learn to do early in life. It's one of the most important things we learn to do. We learn to do it in order to express ourselves and understand others, largely unaware that much more than sharing ideas with each other is taking place. The moment we put ideas into words, the words we choose have an actual physical shape, contours, and form. In our thoughts, the words we select begin producing form. Thought itself sets up charges in the brain's electrical activity. Those electrical charges amount to a change in pattern, or if you like, a change in form. Such changes often go unnoticed by the world because thoughts only have form within the electrochemical medium of our brains, expressed from our inner selves. When we speak our words, their form becomes physical. The sound waves you create fan out into the world through an expanding pattern of changes in air pressure. That pattern of air pressure changes eventually reaches the eardrums of others nearby, the vibrating air molecules bumping into the eardrum surface until it too vibrates. Our eardrums then spark off a pattern of nerve impulses that ride the auditory nerve to the brain, are recognized as words to be decoded by the listener and understood. Vibrating sound has a physical form. Our consciousness, leveraging our evolutionary power of speech and our capacity for language, shapes the physical form of ideas we turn into sound as the words we speak to convey those ideas. An idea, an abstraction with no physical form of its own, takes a physical form it didn't have until it was spoken. Thoughts in the divine mind may take form in a similar way, existing as pure abstraction that when expressed through a pattern of vibration becomes tangible. God, a being of pure consciousness, becomes the Word, which is to say translates thought into vibration that can take physical expression, and through that physical expression bring the physical universe into being. To equate spoken word with the divine is to suggest that God can give shape and form to divine will by utterance of words that produce physical form out of their patterns of vibration. The intentions formed in the divine mind could well create vibrational disturbances that manifest the illusions of space, time, matter, and energy, endowing those illusions with properties, behaviors, and the larger interwoven structure we know as the physical universe. The moment-by-moment conditions expressed in the physical universe are the result of an infinitely detailed pattern of vibration. The power to change the shape of reality depends on being able to access this vibrational pattern and change it. Change the vibration upon which all reality rests, and reality itself changes. As with manifestation, changing reality ultimately depends on commitment that is demonstrated by actions. The simplest way to demonstrate commitment is to give your desires physical expression through your voice. Speaking those desires aloud first entails selecting the words you'll use. If you hadn't put them into words already, the choice to speak your ideas requires you to select your words. Those choices engage your consciousness in a forcing function that results in giving your thoughts a basic physicality. From the breath in your lungs, to the vibrational engine of your vocal cords, to the resonance chamber of your mouth, an entire set of physical responses prepare to be choreographed. In your mind, a split-second passes in which you put these parts of the body on alert that they are about to go to work. When ready, you commit to your words like an orchestra conductor signaling the first downbeat with her baton. The whole process is so familiar that you probably overlook what's happening. You move breath from the center of your body and out into the world, passing it through your vocal cords that transforms the flow by setting it vibrating. This vibrating stream of breath then passes into your mouth, where the anatomy of your lips, tongue, and jaw provide punctuation and texture, reshaping the chamber of speech so that what leaves you and enters the world is a phenomenal, complex pattern of vibration that radiates out from you with very physical form. A meditation produced by Dr. Wayne Dyer shows one way to use the vibrational quality of the voice to signal the universe your desire to participate as a co-creator of reality. The technique of this particular meditation calls for the meditator to repeatedly chant the sound Ah. This Ah sound is the sound of the Atma mentioned in Maitreya Upanishad. It is also called the sound of the Creator and of creation itself. As Wayne Dyer points out, if you listen to the many names given by various peoples to the Creator, they all have the Ah sound in common. God, Buddha, Krishna, Rama, Jehovah, Yahweh, Atma. By invoking the Ah sound, we connect to the creative potential of Source Consciousness and signal our creative intention. Since that field is the very thing that creates and sustains reality, transmitting our desires into the divine mind using the vibration of the Ah sound increases the chances that our reality will change as we wish by more closely aligning us with the vibration of creation. Imagine the Ah sound you make as a carrier wave tuned to a sacred frequency. The desires on which you concentrate ride that carrier wave to the divine mind. Because the meditator is the origin for both the vibrational trigger of the Ah sound and the vibrational pattern associated with his or her desires, the meditator's consciousness blends these two distinct vibrational patterns, just like combining the vibrations of words with that of the voice. It transmits those ideas to the divine mind. My personal religion is not the only place you find hints that the ultimate nature of physical reality is vibrational. Ever since Einstein completed his theory of general relativity, physicists have sought to unify it and quantum mechanics in a grand, unified theory of everything. Physics today is built upon two powerful theories, each of which works at one scale but not at the other. Relativity explains our observations about the universe at the scale of the cosmos, but can't account for the behavior of subatomic matter. Quantum mechanics describes the subatomic world amazingly well, but fails to predict things about the cosmos. That situation suggests the prospects of a larger theory waiting to be imagined, described, and verified by experiments. This grand unified theory, when applied to the large scale of our universe, simplifies itself into general relativity as a special narrow case. At the same time, with the size of the very small, this grand unified theory simplifies itself into quantum mechanics as another special case. A leading candidate for this grand unified theory is something called string theory. For now, there are two main features of string theory worth mentioning. First is that it meets the mathematical requirements for a grand unified theory, which is to say that string theory math boils down to general relativity in the case of the cosmic scale, and down to quantum theory in the case of the subatomic scale. The second feature worth mentioning are the strings themselves. According to string theory, all energy in matter is made up of exceedingly tiny, vibrating loops of something that looks like strings. These strings are described as being energy, but perhaps may be something that's neither matter nor energy, yet able to produce all the fundamental particles of matter and the different forms of energy. I'm not going to describe the strings as energy because I have another description in mind. As the theory goes, some of these strings vibrated at certain frequencies would manifest in the reality of our perception as electrons. Other strings, exhibiting a different vibration, could present itself in our perceptions as a photon of light. One of the reasons why science has been so excited by the discovery of the predicted Higgs boson is that we now know what gives mass to all matter in the universe, gives it its matterness, if you will. And the Higgs boson would be a string of yet another particular vibration. In effect, all forms of matter and energy amount to expressions of various stable vibrational states these strings can have. Like the collection of strings inside a piano, each able to produce a particular note because of the way that string vibrates, while being exactly the same kind of string as its neighbors, who produce different notes from their different vibrations. For this theory to work mathematically, something very mind-bending has to be true. Having already conveyed some weird ground with quantum mechanics, you might wonder what could be any weirder about reality than that. How about a universe with more than 4 dimensions? Common sense tells us that there are 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. For string theory to produce its results, there have to be at least 10 space-time dimensions, with some of them insanely small and wrapped around the dimensions we already know. One variation requires 26 dimensions. But if string theory proves true, and our reality is eventually built from more dimensions than common sense suggests, perhaps these strings vibrate in ways that cause them to move at least partially within these additional dimensions where we can't see them. One of the qualities of electromagnetic waves is that they spread out in space. For example, a light wave as a whole doesn't have a single location, a single point. The wave spreads out, and in the process is most accurately described by motion than by any particular location. So, for a wave of light or a matter wave, it has motion or momentum that is well defined, but not a location or position. A spread out wave doesn't have a well-defined location because it occupies a lot of locations at once. But as something spread out, an entire wave defines a direction of travel. A wave has a well-defined motion or momentum. An electron exists at any given moment around the nucleus of an atom within a volume of space called an orbital that's defined by that electron's energy. They hop around at random, jumping from one location in the orbital to another location. As a particle, the electron seems to teleport itself from one location to another. As a particle, the electron has no well-defined direction. It could turn up anywhere as long as that location is inside the orbital. One explanation for how this teleporting takes place stems from something very interesting that happens when waves overlap. What we consider a particle may actually be a complex clustering of multiple waves. Here's what I mean. A single simple wave follows a very straightforward pattern of oscillation between crest and trough. For a given wave, you can identify similar waves with a frequency that's a multiple of the original. These similar waves are called harmonics of the first wave. Waves can be combined, adding or subtracting their amplitude at each moment in time in a manner called interference. Depending on the amplitude, frequency, and phase of the waves you combine, the result of the addition can produce the emergence of a single pronounced peak of energy, with the rest of the wave canceling out to near zero. Adding the right combination of waves together results in a phenomenon that is less spread out the way a single pure frequency wave is. It becomes more and more localized, giving it a more well-defined location. Combine the right mix of wave ingredients, and what once behaved as a collection of overlapping waves with no well-defined position begins to form a knotting together of waves called a wave packet, into which something with increasingly well-defined position. Keep adding the right waves into the wave packet, and it gets more compact and localized, until a particle emerges. So if an electron vibrates at a single pure frequency, it exhibits classic wave behavior, spread out in space with a well-defined momentum, but not a well-defined location. If that electron begins to vibrate in a more complex manner, described by the addition of the proper combination of additional vibrations, it starts to become more and more localized, giving it a well-defined position, but lacking a well-defined direction. One way to imagine an electron is as a complex harmony of waves. Perhaps matter doesn't change from particle to wave and back, but instead changes in vibration from a single pure frequency, producing wave behavior, to a complex collection of harmonics, producing particle behavior. Even when it's a particle, it's still really a wave, or waves if you prefer. Which behavior we see depends on the vibrational state being expressed in the moment. You can play a single key on a piano to hear a note. That note is like a single pure wave. But play a number of keys together, producing a chord, and the sound you hear is more complex, resulting from all the waves being combined. What we take as solid matter is made of subatomic particles that are themselves these vibrating strings whose vibrational pattern constantly switches from a single pure wave pitch behavior to a cluster of overlapping waves in particle vibration behavior. If everything we encounter in the physical universe, from beams of light to the atoms that form our own flesh and bones, are just different variations and combinations of waves, then all the physical reality we know is a rich and complex pattern of interacting and overlapping vibrations. These vibrations may arise from the quiver of strings in multiple dimensions, most of which are outside our sensory perceptions to notice or the power of our experiments to detect. Next time on the Temporal Reverie, I want to visit one of the more popular stories in the Judeo-Christian religious tradition. In the book of Exodus, before Moses undertakes the mission to free the Hebrew people from Egyptian enslavement, he is lured into an audience with a manifestation of God. The form God chooses for his appearance to Moses is that of a burning bush. Is the idea of the burning bush symbolic of a deep truth about the universe, perhaps one that must be understood and embraced on the way to mastery over miracles? If everything in reality owes its existence and form to vibrations arising from the background field of divine consciousness, then we can begin to imagine how the patterns we make in our own consciousness could influence the behavior of the universe. With control of these patterns, we may find how to affect the shape of reality itself. In a very literal sense, it could be that changing your mind can change the world. I'd like to know what you think about this episode. Please leave any questions or thoughts you'd like to share in the comments below. My thanks to God for this chance to share with all of you, and may the gifts of love, joy, peace, and enlightenment come to you all.